Hi, my name's Anita. My composer that I'm presenting to you today is Johann Sebastian Bach, the giant of music. This was a real baptism for me into Bach because I really hadn't played anything of his, and as I listened to the music that he's known for, which are his orchestral music, the Brandenburg concertos, the solo instrumental works for violin and cello, his keyboard works, the Goldberg variations, and the well-tempered clavier, his organ works, the Schubler chorales and toccata fugue in D minor, and his choral works, St. Matthew's Passion and the Mass in B minor. I realize that I've heard this music all my life. I just didn't know that it was Bach. Very familiar. So he was born in Einsach, Germany. He was the 8th and youngest child of Johann Ambrosius Bach, who was the director of the town musicians, and Maria Elizabeth Lammerhart. His father most likely taught him violin and the basics of music theory. His uncles were all professional musicians. Both of his parents died when he was 10 years old. He moved in with his older brother, Johann Christoph, who was also a musician. Here he studied music, he copied music, he performed, and learned from his brother on the clavichord. His brother was an organist at St. Michael's Church in Altenburg and exposed him to composers of southern Germany, who included composers like Pachelbel and others in northern Germany, and Frenchmen, and it says even Italians. Pachelbel, as you know, was a German composer, an organist, and a teacher who, they say, brought the southern German organ schools to their peak. At 15, he enrolled in St. Michael's School, which was a 2 weeks journey on foot. You have to put yourself in that perspective. It's amazing what they did. He was exposed there to a wider European culture, some of the sons of German aristocrats, and he was exposed to choir, organ, and harpsichord. In 2003, when he graduated, he was hired as a court musician in the chapel of the Duke of Weimar. After 7 months, word had spread about his organist ability. He was invited to inspect and offer a first performance for an organ located at the new church, which is now known as Bach Church. Shortly thereafter, he became their organist with light duties, good salary, and a newly tuned organ. Apparently, Bach had very high expectations for choir members, and within a few years, tensions found him to be attacked with a stick by a choir member who was acquitted, and Bach was asked to be more moderate in his expectations. Shortly thereafter, he took time off to study with the composer Johann Reinken, and he went to hear him play in the northern city of Lübeck, which was 280 miles on foot. From him, he learned listening to his organ playing, compositional techniques. He was a master of fugue, improvisation skills, and Bach had copied Reinken's work when he was 15 years old. And Bach's 4-week visit turned into 4 months. And years later, many years later, he went back to visit Reinken and show him his improvisation skills. And Reinken was said to have replied that he thought the skill was dead, but he sees that it lived in him. So he was very impressed. In 2007, Bach became organist in Mulhausen at the Blasius Church. There he had better pay, better choir, and a major organ renovation. This is where he married his second cousin, Maria Barbara Bach. He returned to Weimar in 2008 and in the ducal court as organist, and in 2014 became concertmeister. This was well funded with professional musicians. 3 sons were born here, and 3 others were born that did not live to see their first birthday. An older sister moved in to help them run the house. Here is where he began his sustained work of composing keyboard and orchestral works. In transcribing Vivaldi's concertos, he learned to write dramatic openings, to go along with the dynamic rhythms and harmonic schemes of Vivaldi and other Italians. He was attracted to the Italian style of solo instruments alternating sections by section with a full orchestra. There came a position open for Kapellmeister, which is the highest position, and he was not chosen for it. It was the son of the person who had been in that position, and he became very upset about this, and so he tendered his resignation. And he took a position with another location as Kapellmeister, who gave him that position. However, his current employer refused to accept his resignation, and he had no power over that. So for 3 months, he tried to continue to tender his resignation, and it was refused, and he became very upset and belligerent, and so his employer had him jailed. And he was in jail for nearly a month, and during that time, he had pencil and paper. And so he began to compose some of his works, which began with the Well-Tempered Clavier. So he was not going to give in no matter what, and finally his employer blinked and they freed him. The quote in the publication said, "On November 6, 1717, the concertmaster and court organist Bach was arrested and held at the county magistrate's house of detention for obstinate behavior and forcing the question of his dismissal. Finally, on December 2nd, Bach was informed by the court secretary of his unfavorable discharge and simultaneously freed from arrest." So he goes to his new position as Kapellmeister in 1717 for Leopold, the Prince of Anhalt-Köthen. He himself was a musician, so he appreciated Bach, and he paid him well and gave him considerable latitude in composing and performing. The Prince was a Calvinist and did not use elaborate music in worship, so a lot of Bach's work from this period were secular, including the Brandenburg concertos. Despite being born in the same year, about 80 miles apart, Bach and Handel had never met. In 1719, Bach journeyed 22 miles to meet Handel, but when he got there, he found that he had left the town and he no longer lived there. So in 1720, while Bach was away with the Prince, his wife suddenly died. And following that, a year later, he met Anna Magdalena, who was a gifted soprano and was 16 years his junior. They married and shared 13 children, 6 of whom survived to adulthood. Johann Christoph and Johann Christian both became significant musicians, and others were active as well. In Leipzig in 23 to 50, at the age of 38, Bach was appointed as Thomas Cantor, director of music for the church, which was the leading cantorate in Protestant Germany. He had to direct the St. Thomas School in singing and provide 4 churches with music. He composed over 300 cantatas while he was there, and he frequently disagreed with his employer, the Leipzig City Council, and regarded them as penny pinching. Bach broadened his composing and performing beyond the liturgy by taking over in March of 1729 the directorship of the Collegium Musicum, a secular performance ensemble that was created by Telemann. They performed at a place, the Café Zimmermann, which was a coffee house where a lot of his works were showcased. In 1733, upon presentation of the Mass in B minor to the Elector, he was given the title of court composer, which in turn brought greater bargaining power with the Leipzig Council. And he was also honored with the title of Royal Court Composer from Augustus III in 1736. In the final years, he transcribed music and he did final revisions to his earlier works. In 46, as preparation to enter the Society of Musical Sciences, he was challenged by Frederick II of Prussia. He gave him a theme and he had to, on the spot, create a fugue, which obviously he did. And subsequently, he made a composition that included this, and he dedicated it to Frederick, and many of his pieces were then published after that time. Two large-scale compositions occupied a central place in Bach's last years. From around 42, he wrote and revised the various canons and fugues in the Art of Fugue, which he continued to prepare for publication until shortly before his death. After extracting a cantata from his Kyrie Gloria Mass in mid-40s, he expanded that into the Mass in B minor. And although the complete Mass was never performed during his lifetime, it's considered to be among the greatest choral works in history. Becoming blind, Bach underwent eye surgery in March of 1750, and again in April by the British eye surgeon John Taylor, a man widely understood today as a charlatan and believed to have blinded hundreds of people. Bach died on July 28, 1750, from complications due to the unsuccessful treatment. He was 65 years old. His musical style, with much attention to structure and composition, was hallmarked by his four-part harmony, modulation, ornamentation, continuo solos, instrumentation, and counterpoint. In addition, varieties of form and rhythm were introduced. Hence, harmony became no longer mere accompaniment of melody, but rather a potent agency for augmenting the richness and expressiveness of musical conversation. His wife, Anna Magdalena, had helped him write a lot of his compositions. And it just, when I think of having done all of that, I've been involved with this for weeks at a time, and the one word that comes through to me is passion. The passion that he had from the very beginning till the very end for music, and that really was the constant in his life when you think about having lost his parents at such a young age. But his whole family was, I mean, he was born into music and lived music every minute of his entire life. So he made a quote when he was doing his work in the churches, and he said, "I wish to make German psalms for the people, that is to say, sacred hymns, so that the word of God may dwell among the people, also by means of song." His goal was to incite devotion. To me, and this is just my opinion, but he likens to music what Ben Franklin was to the founding of our country. That much of a foundation he was to music, like Ben Franklin was to the foundation of our country, in terms of his ability and his passion and his knowledge and givingness of so much that has become who we are, more or less. So the piece itself is one of his concertos. It's the concerto in D major, D minor, and it was part of 8 harpsichord concertos that were done by him in 1738, and they were published in 1838. This is in 3 movements. We'll hear the first movement, but the 3 movements are allegro, adagio, and allegro. This is interesting that during his lifetime he didn't have hardly any recognition of his work, really. And it was Felix Mendelssohn, who came many years later, and his family were all involved in his music, and they played this piece. His own aunt, Mendelssohn's aunt, had played it, Sarah Levy, and then his sister Fanny Mendelssohn played it, and then he introduced it when he was the leader of the, what is it called? I can't think of it. I don't have the name of it here. But anyway, he introduced it to the wider world and really made that begin to, people, a lot of other musicians followed him who saw the talent that he had. And he was a part of everybody's, Mozart, and Brahms even did a cadenza to the end of it at some point later in time. And then the performer is Polina Ostinskaya. She was born in Russia and began playing music at the age of 5. She performed on stage at 6. At 7, she entered the Central Music School in Moscow Conservatory. And by 8 years old, she gave her first solo concert in Moscow. And at the age of 8 also, she performed Bach's Concerto in D minor at the age of 8 with the Lithuanian Chamber Orchestra. And then in 1987, when Ostenskaya was 11 years old, she made her debut at the Great Hall of Moscow Conservatory. And she played Mozart's Concerto No. 23 in A major with the Chamber Orchestra. She continued her musical education at the Lyceum School in St. Petersburg, where Marina Wolf was her teacher. In 1998, at 23, she graduated from St. Petersburg Conservatory as an external student. In 2000, she completed an assistantship internship at the Moscow Conservatory with Professor Vera Bronostayeva, something like that. She tours Russia and other places in the world. She performs with other musicians. She has participated in many prestigious music festivals. Socially, she has created the Polina Ostenskaya Professional Health Support Center for Musicians, where she helps musicians and people in creative professions solving problems related to the peculiarities of their profession, such as overplayed hands, muscle cramps, etc., fear of going on stage. She has engaged in charitable activities. She's a trustee of the Oxygen Foundation, which helps people with cystic fibrosis. And in 2022, she and other Russian artists signed a letter against the invasion of Ukraine. And after that, she faced cancellation of her concerts in all state and government concert halls in Russia. She's been married twice, and had 2 children, and raised a daughter who was her stepdaughter. And she wrote an autobiography, and which is entitled Farewell to Sadness, which became a bestseller. And in the book, she talks about her unusual circumstances of her childhood, and as well as her difficult development as a musician. So it might be a good read. And without further ado,
Thank